What's up guys, welcome to my balanced Druid guide for patch 7.3. Now in this guide I'm going to be going over your spells and abilities, your talents, your artifacts relic choices, your stat priority, and then your single target and AoE rotations if you will, or priority systems, as well as demonstrations of each on these dummies, and then just some macros and add-ons that I use that you might find useful. Now for quick and easy browsing, I have included timestamps in the description below, so you can click on those to skip to the section that you want to see. Now I'm going to start with your spells and abilities, and I will make quick mention of your astral power bar. This is your secondary resource. Some spells generate astral power, and some will spend it, and it does decay out of combat eventually. Now, the first spells I want to go over are your Moonfire and Sunfire spells. These are both damage over time abilities. Now Moonfire looks like this, you just gain 3 astral power when you cast it, and it applies this damage over time effect, so it does some damage up front, and then applies that damage over time. Now Sunfire is the same essentially, except that it will hit the original target, and then spread the dot to other nearby targets if they're within range, so it looks like this. And it also generates 3 astral power. As you can see, it does apply the dot effect to the other 2 targets. Note that the direct damage portion only hits the first target that you attack with it. Now Solar Wrath, single target spell, it's got a short cast time and it generates 8 astral power baseline. Looks like this, you just have a cast, you shoot it off, it does some damage. Lunar Strike, similar, it's got a longer cast time and does cleave targets around it and generates 12 astral power baseline. So as you can see, you'll cast this, it does some damage and will actually hit nearby targets within range. Next we've got your artifact ability, and they are the moon spells, and there's 3 versions. There's new moon, half moon, and full moon, and every time you cast one of them, so say new moon, it will then go to the next phase, which is half moon, and then that goes to full moon, which then goes back to new moon. Now new moon is very short cast and it generates 10 astral power, so it looks like this. You shoot it off a single target. Then half moon, slightly longer cast, does more damage and generates 20 astral power, and it looks like this. And then full moon is a much longer cast time. It generates 40 astral power, and it actually does do AoE damage, but it splits the damage, so it does the same damage to single target as well as AoE, and it looks like this. And you crash this big moon down. Now as far as spending astral power goes, we have a couple options. The first is Star Surge. This costs 40 astral power. You attack the target and it does a bunch of damage, and it looks like this. Now note that you also will gain empowerment, so you'll gain lunar empowerment and solar empowerment, which increase the damage of your next Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike depending on the empowerment. The other option we have is for AoE. It's called Starfall, and I'll generate a little bit more astral power so we can use it. And basically it costs 60 astral power. You get to have this targeting reticle and put down a big area of effects, and it does damage to everything in the area. Now it also does stellar empowerment to all these enemies, and this makes them take more damage from your damage over time spells, your Moonfire and Sunfire. So Starfall looks like this, and so it does damage as well as putting this stellar empowerment debuff on all the targets, making them take more damage from your AoE. Now in terms of DPS cooldowns, we do have one main one, and it's called Celestial Alignment. Now right now I have Incarnation, so it is called that instead, but as you can see here, Celestial Alignment, 3-minute cooldown, increases your damage of all your spells by a significant amount, and then it also increases the astral power you generate through Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath for the duration. Other than that, we do have some utility. We've got Solar Beam as our interrupt. It's a 1-minute cooldown. It basically puts this big beam of light that interrupts and silences enemies within its radius. It looks like this. And if you do actually manage to interrupt a spell, so not just silence, but actually interrupt somebody's spellcast, it will reduce its cooldown to 45 seconds instead. And it does last 8 seconds in the area. We also do have some heals. Regrowth is our baseline heal. Short cast looks like this, and it just heals you for a bunch up front and a small amount over time. We also have Entangling Roots for CC, crowd control, and it just roots the target in place, has a cast time on it, looks like this. And we'll root them in place, damage will break that effect, so do be aware of that. We also have Innovate, which is a very useful cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown, and you can use it on anyone who uses mana, mainly healers, and basically it makes them cast for free for 10 seconds, so while they have this buff, they don't spend any mana. So it's a very, very nifty spell there. We also have Remove Corruption. It can dispel curse and poison effects, so something nice to have, a friendly dispel. In terms of movement, we do have a dash, as well as cat form. Now cat form just changes you into a cat, and you run slightly faster. And then dash is a 3-minute cooldown, which activates cat form if you're not already in it, and it makes you dash really quickly like so. Defensively, we do have Barkskin. It's a 1-minute cooldown. It's 20% damage reduction and can be used while you are in a variety of crowd control already. And then we've got Rebirth, which is our battle res. And this is instant cast and can be cast in any form, and it just reses somebody in battle. Now note that in our Moonkin form, it's been baked in, but basically if we take damage, we actually have a chance to proc a free and instant Lunar Strike. And also if you ever shapeshift, you can break roots and snares. So switching, say, into bear form or cat form or back to boomkin form will remove snares, and it's quite useful. Next, I want to go over your talents. Now, at level 15, basically Star-Lord is kind of your go-to, especially for single target. It is the best that you'll have, and it makes your solar and lunar empowerment that you get from Star Surge also reduce the cast time of the spell, so it gives you faster solar wraths and lunar strikes. Now, for AoE, Warrior of Luna is the only talent that actually boosts your AoE in this tier, so this is your go-to for pure AoE, but note you will lose out on some single targets, so a lot of times I'll leave Star-Lord in so I can at least do some extra single target damage, but again, this is the only one that does boost your AoE. The Force of Nature can be useful for the taunts, maybe on like a skittish week or a necrotic week or something where a taunt can be useful. You might find some situational use for this, but in general you'll be picking one of these two. Level 30, you can pick whatever you want. Renewal is a survival ability, whereas Wild Charge and Displace the Beast are movement abilities, so kind of pick what you want and what fits the situation. Note that when you use Wild Charge in a Moonkin form and it looks like this, it's like a disengage for hunters, so you kind of shoot backward. Whereas Displace the Beast is a teleport, and so kind of again, whatever you like in this row. In 45, generally it's really up to you, but generally I recommend Resto or Guardian Affinity, depending on the situation and what's going on in the fight. Resto Affinity will help you survive through heals. You get a passive heal, which is pretty nice, as well as a Swift Mend, which is a fairly significant heal on a 30-second cooldown. Whereas Guardian will just reduce the damage you take, as well as giving you access to Frenzy Regeneration in bear form, which can be really useful for surviving high-level, like high-end content, like Mythic Raiding, or high-level Mythic Plus, stuff like that. So kind of up to you. Feral Affinity, if you really need the movement speed, you can take it. I don't normally find the need for it with things like Wild Charge or Displace the Beast, but again, totally up to you. For survivability, I do recommend Resto or Guardian Affinity, depending on your situation. Level 60 is all CC, so totally up to you. Single target stun, AoE root, or a knockback that looks like this. So kind of up to you what you want, what you prefer, and what you find useful. Now, at level 75, you're basically looking at Incarnation. This is kind of your go-to for most situations, like minor cleave, minor AoE, and such like that. It just buffs your Celestial Alignment, makes it a lot better, and lasts longer. Now, if you're looking at heavy AoE, or you really want to focus on dishing out the add damage, then Soul of the Forest will be your go-to. And you don't really take Stellar Flare that often right now, if at all. It's just not worth it versus the other two. Level 90, single target, you want Blessing of the Ancients, and you want to stay in Blessing of Elune when you are using this talent. It just gives you the most astral power generation, assuming you can cast. Now, if you can't stand there and cast a lot, or you want to do AoE, then Shooting Stars is your best, because it will help you generate the most astral power just by having your dots up on things. Astral Communion is only good with Fury of Elune, which I don't really recommend right now, so I don't recommend it in general. Now at level 100, you're basically looking between Nature's Balance for pure single target, or Stellar Drift for AoE. In addition, if you happen to have the legendary wrists, then you'll be using Stellar Drift always, as long as you have those active or equipped. Now, as a final note on talents, sometimes you can mix and match things depending on your situation. For example, maybe you want big single targets, so you want Incarnation and Blessing or something, but you do want the ability to do some AoE and like a Mythic Plus, so you could take Stellar Drift even if you don't have the wrists, for example, just so you could do more AoE damage, even though you give up a little bit of single target from Nature's Balance, things like that. So you can mix and match to fit the situation. A lot of times, if I go to AoE spec, I will still have Star-Lord, so I have decent single target as well. Again, things like Mythic Plus, but kind of up to you, so don't be afraid to play around and see what fits your needs and what you like. Now, as far as your artifact weapon goes, I'm pretty much just going to go over Relics now because the pathing isn't that important. You get artifact knowledge baseline, you will easily fill out your weapon, and so you don't have to worry about it too much. Now, I will talk about what traits are best and the relative power, so that you can pick if you do have a couple of days between, you know, getting 110 and leveling up your weapon to 52. But I'm not going to go over the pathing because, again, it's very easy to fill it out completely, even up to Concordance. Now, when I talk about the levels, I'm going to be using the weapon level. That's not the item level, as you can see. So the item level on this relic is a 925. But what I'm interested in is the plus 65 item levels. So that's what I'll be referring to as weapon levels. And the relative strength of the traits in terms of that. Now for pure single target, Scythe of the Stars is the best one by far. And it's worth between 4 to 5 weapon levels. So it's worth quite a bit more. Just make sure that if you're focusing on single target and you find a relic with this trait, that you do consider that extra boost it does give. Now everything else is pretty minor in comparison, but it does go in order: Dark Side of the Moon, and Solar Stabbing, and then the 2 dots, Twilight Glow and Sunfire Burns. And then if you're using Onus Intuition, the legendary risks, then Falling Star. Now all of those are basically worth between 1 and 2 weapon levels. And the difference is pretty negligible between all of them. Now for AoE, you're going to want Falling Star as your best, and this is worth just under 5 weapon levels, so between 4 and 5 weapon levels. And then the others are going to be the 2 dots, so Twilight Glow and Sunfire Burns, as well as Light of the Evening Star, which is also quite strong for AoE. Now those 3 are worth just about 3 weapon levels. As a small note, if you happen to be using Lady and the Child, the legendary shoulders, then Twilight Glow is closer in value to Falling Star, so again, over 4 weapon levels. And then after that, everything is pretty negligible and worth less than a full weapon level, so I wouldn't worry about those too much for AoE. As far as stats go, the best way to know is to simulate your own character, so run it through something like Simulation Craft, or if one of your class discords, for example, has a spreadsheet that you can use, you can simulate your character through that as well. But in general, you'll be looking at Mastery as your best secondary stat, then Haste, and then Crit and Versatility, kind of at the bottom end there, but Crit being slightly higher than Versatility. But again, these things do change, especially as you get more gear. So if you get all mastery gear, then you might start to find that other stats will kind of weigh better, and it'll be good to swap some of those out. So I really do recommend you simulate your own character, but those are kind of the generic stat priorities. So mastery, then haste, and then crit, and then verse. Now I want to go over your single target rotation, if you will, on your priority system. There's just a few concepts to know. First is you want your Moonfire and Sunfire active pretty much all the time. You want to keep close to 100% uptime, if not actually 100%. And you also then want to make sure you never overcap your astral power, so never go try to fill beyond max. Then don't waste your moon spell, so don't sit on 3 charges of moon spells. And then finally, try not to overcap on your empowerments, so your solar and lunar empowerments, which come from using Star Surge. Now if you have to choose one of those to break, astral power, moon spells, or empowerments, then empowerments is the one that you will give up and break if you have to, some situation arises. Other than that, you're spending all the astral power you use on Star Surge, as long as you're doing single target, and you just want to use moon spells as your highest priority astral power generators, because they give you the best astral power per cast time, and then followed up with Solar Wrath, Empowered Solar Wrath, Empowered Lunar Strike, and then if everything else is on cooldown and you can't even use Star Surge, then you can use an unempowered Solar Wrath. to kind of help you get up to at least 40. So that's pretty much it for the single target rotation. Now, a couple notes with things like the 4-piece. For example, you can actually pull up a little bit because it'll benefit you. I won't go into too much detail on that, but know that you can pull up if you either need to save some burst for a specific phase, if you're working with the 4-piece and your buff is about to come off cooldown, or you haven't got the buff up yet. Things like that. So you can pull up, but generally try to use empowered Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike if possible, instead of unempowered Solar Wrath all the time, because you don't want to give up that extra damage and cast speed. Now, in terms of the opener, you will pre-pot at either 3 or 2 seconds, depending. If you do it at 3, you can normally fit in 2 Solar Wraths. So you pre-pot, cast at 3, cast again, and then New Moon. And if you're not comfortable with that, or you think you might pull early, or you're not max range, then you can just pre-pot at 2, do 1 Solar Wrath into a New Moon, and then your 2 dots. Then you pop your Incarnation, shoot off your Moon spells, the rest of them, and you know, go ahead with Star Surges, or of course you can pull up if you like a little bit of Astral Power, if you're running with the 4-piece and are more comfortable doing that. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate for you guys here. So pretend to pre-pot, double cast Solar Wrath, and then New Moon, and put 2 dots on, so Moonfire, Sunfire, pop my Incarnation and my Trinket, use my Moon spells, and here I'll go ahead and just Star Surge a couple times. No, I'm not going to worry about the 4-piece right now. So I'll just keep doing this, Star Surge, so I empowered Solar Wrath, empowered Lunar Strike, empowered Solar Wrath. Now I notice my dots are coming up, so I'll go ahead and refresh them. Star Surge a couple times, use my New Moon, empowered Solar Wrath, empowered Lunar Strike, and so on and so forth. Now, you don't have to do it always like one after the other, so here I could do 2 Solar Wraths that are both empowered, then 2 Lunar Strikes if I felt like it. The idea is, again, just to not waste Astral Power, not waste your empowerments, not let your Moon spells sit too long. It doesn't mean you have to use them right away. Just make sure you use them before they get to 3 stacks for the Moon spells and so on. Now, if you want, say you want to pull up for some extra damage period, maybe an ad is coming out that's important, or a burn phase on a shield, then maybe you'll pull up some Astral Power. So in this case, you could use some unempowered Solar Wraths, pull up a little bit, and then ricochet off some Star Surges. But again, you don't want to waste Astral Power, so you wouldn't want to go above your maximum, because that's, you know, just more Astral Power you could have used, and more Star Surges, and so on. So that's pretty much the idea here. You're just building up Astral Power, using your Moon spells, using your empowered Lunar Strikes and Solar Wraths and so on. And then just Star Surge when you're ready. Now again, for things like the 4-piece, just briefly, or if you need to save up some burst for an ad, like maybe on a Fallen Avatar with the Maiden Shield coming up, then you can pull up your Astral Power without using the empowered spells, just so you're ready for that. Now as far as AoE goes, very similar concepts to single target, with a few differences. You still want to have your dots on everything that you're hitting as much as possible. That's both Moonfire and Sunfire if you can. You still want to use your Moon spells as your main filler, your main Astral Power generator, because they're still giving you the best value of Astral Power per cast time. And then, as far as the fillers after that go, if you happen to have empowerments from Star Surge, and maybe there's like a single target phase and then ads come out, then you can still use the empowered spells, but Lunar Strike will be prioritized over Solar Wrath at 3 or more targets. Now, in terms of spending Astral Power, you don't want to use Star Surge because you want to be using Starfall instead, and basically just whenever you would use Star Surge in an AoE situation, you just use Starfall instead. The most important thing about Starfall, though, is to keep it up as long as possible. The buff that it gives, the Stellar Empowerment debuff that it puts on targets, is the biggest contributor to your AoE, along with having those dots up. So if you have to choose, if there's a situation in which you could rocket off 2 Starfalls at once, but then that would mean there'd be some downtime where you don't have Starfall up, then you want to kind of spread them out to increase the uptime of that Starfall debuff and Stellar Empowerment debuff. Now if you're using Soul of the Force, generally you won't run into this issue too much, because it's just so cheap that you can pretty much use it all the time. But if that situation ever arises, that's kind of the priority there, is to keep up Starfall as long as possible without any breaks. Now in terms of how many ads you can keep dots up on, or whether it's worth using, you know, Moonfire on stuff, first of all, if the target is going to live 6 or more seconds, it's probably worth using a Moonfire on it, up to about 5 targets. Now, if you have Lady and the Child, the Legendary Shoulders, you can do way more because obviously you can double that, as it basically will apply to multiple targets. But without them, just up to 5 targets, still keep Moonfire up, as well as Sunfire, of course. But past 5 targets, just try to roll with Sunfire and then Starfall and fillers, because it's not worth your time trying to dot up all these different things. Now, it doesn't mean you have to put Sunfire on things and then put Moonfire on every target first and then Starfall. You could put Sunfire down, generate some Astral Power, maybe a Moonfire or 2, put Starfall down, let that start rolling, let that damage start happening, and then, you know, continue Moonfiring while that's active, generate some more Astral Power, Starfall, and so on. I'm not going to go over the openers, pretty much the same thing. Again, you tend not to have an opener on like big AoE, so it's not too important anyway. But basically, just start by dotting stuff up and getting your Starfall out. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate for you guys here a little bit. So I'll go ahead and put a Sunfire down on here, Sunfire over here, and maybe I'll start building some Astral Power, use my Moon spells, get enough. I'll put Starfall down, start putting Moonfires up here and here. Now I have enough already, so I can Starfall again. Maybe I'll New Moon here and start using Lunar Strike because I am 3+ targets. And then reapply my dots. And then Lunar Strike, actually you should Lunar Strike over here. Starfall up. Maybe use this Moon spell, start doing some Moonfires again. Making sure I'm keeping those up. Put a Starfall to make sure I'm not losing that buff, that debuff and buff timers. Put my dots up, keep those active, Starfall again, and so on and so forth. And the Moon is up here. Can Lunar Strike over here. And this is just kind of the way it goes. Again, keeping up your dots. Now, if I had like 6 targets, 7 targets, even more, then, you know, I wouldn't necessarily put the Moonfires on. I'd just be using filler spells more, like the Moon spells, the Lunar Strikes, and so on. But because I'm at 5 here, that I'm really keeping up my dots on, I just want to have both, if possible. As you can see, it produces a lot more damage that way. As far as macros and add-ons go, I don't use too many macros. For my Druid, I do have Incarnation macroed with my Troll Racial, as I am a Troll. And that's just because they happen to line up perfectly. Now, I also have a separate button because if you do have, you know, the Impeccable Fellows in Spring, they will de-align. But it's just a simple /cast macro, and I will have this in the description below if you're interested in that. I also do have a focus innervate, so I don't have to keep typing in a new name, and I don't have to click on someone to find, you know, where they are in the raid frames. But basically, you would put whatever healer you're assigned to on focus, and then you can just press this macro, and it would instantly innervate them without you having to look. As far as add-ons go, the main one I do use is, of course, Weak Auras too, and you probably saw a lot of these during the demonstrations and so on. And basically, I'm using it to track my stacks of Solar Wrath or Solar Empowerments and Lunar Empowerments, as well as the cooldowns on my big cooldowns, my Celestial Alignment or Incarnation, and my Moon spells and stacks and so on. I'm also tracking the duration of Starfall, and you can pretty much do anything you want with this add-on, given that you know how to. So it's very powerful. I use it for dot tracking as well, so dot timers. Just very, very powerful and useful add-on that I really do recommend if you care to put the time in to kind of learn how to do at least the basic functions like I have. Then you can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. My damage and healing meter, I'm using Details, which is really cool. It does have a bit of setup time, so it's not just a load in and use it add-on. You do have to set it up a little bit, but Scada and Recount are quite nice as well, and they all work, but I do prefer Details. Now my bars are Bartender 4. You can move the bars around, mess around with it. You can customize which bars you have open, how big they are, how many buttons, how many rows, so on. You can do your extraction buttons, micro menus, pet bars, all this stuff you can mess around with, and you can set key bindings to whatever you like. You can make them character specific and just kind of mess around as you like. The cooldowns, if you ever see those in any of my videos, generally come from Exorcist raid tools. So you can set up raid-wide cooldowns, tracking, and so on, battle reses. You can inspect your raid. You can write notes to the raid for like setups, healer cooldowns, etc. You can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. I also do use AoE 3 for battle res timing. Basically, I like the battle res monitor a little bit better. Also, you can do the same things like consumable checks, you can do cooldowns, and you can also do some alerts which are pretty cool that I like. So things like CCs being broken, misdirects, interrupts, combat reses, and so on, taunts, etc. It's kind of useful all around add-ons for raiding that I do like. And then I do have Doom Cooldown Pulse. It flashes the icon in the middle of my screen when something comes off cooldown. It's really easy, fire and forget add-on. I loaded it in, and I'm pretty sure I've never actually changed the settings, and it appears to be broken right now. But I don't necessarily recommend it, just because it's sometimes inaccurate, especially if you play certain classes that change their cooldowns. Plus, again, anything you can do in there, you can do in weak auras too as well. So, but it is easy to use, so some people might like that. So that's pretty much it for this video. Now, if you did like this video, feel free to hit it with a like. If you want to see when I post new content like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you know when that happens. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section below, or catch me streaming at twitch.tv/Marilone and ask me there. And I hope you guys like this, enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. Cheers.